The Dark Cosmos presents I signed up for a secret experiment, but got sent back in time. By Christopher Valin. A special thanks to Chris for letting me narrate his story tonight. He's my colleague at the high school I work at. Hey Cosmic Travelers, it's Kian, tonight's narrator. Enjoy tonight's sci-fi horror story. And remember, stay cosmic. As approaching footsteps echoed down the starkly lit corridor, Todd quickly hid around the corner. He peeked out to see who it was and saw himself approaching, looking back to see who was following him. Todd stuck out his leg and tripped his other self, who fell flat on his face. The other Todd looked up and backed away in shock as he saw who had tripped him up. You're... You. Right. Now, listen. You can't. Second Todd wasn't interested. He popped first Todd in the face, knocking him back to where he had been hiding, and ran for a nearby security door. Second Todd looked at the lock mechanism on the door, then pulled out a key card and swiped it. First Todd started to get up, but heard more footsteps coming down the hall and hid again as second Todd ran through the open doorway. Todd leaned against the wall, looking up in frustration, and shook his head to himself. Not again. Todd picked around the ice machine and looked into the dining area. Jeff's break was just about over, so he'd be standing up any second. Todd tried to stifle a laugh as he watched a tall, thin waiter try to get up from his seat at the booth. As expected, Jeff wasn't able to stand. What the? Jeff realized as he was stuck to the seat. Son of a... He also knew immediately who had glued him to it. Todd! Todd couldn't contain it anymore. He leaned against the ice machine and busted out in loud guffaws as Jeff started screaming from the other part of the restaurant. Something was wrong. Jeff wasn't just angry. He was in pain. Ah! It's burning! Someone call 911! How was I supposed to know the super glue would soak through his pants? In the parking lot, a couple of medics were pushing Jeff on a gurney. Jeff was face down with his rear in the air as they loaded him into the ambulance. Todd wasn't getting any sympathy from his manager. You shouldn't have to know, because you shouldn't use it for something like that in the first place. You have to admit though, I really got him good this time. Todd, Jeff's going to be out of work for at least a few days. Sometimes funny just isn't worth it. Dude, he plays practical jokes on me all the time. Todd thought back to the last one, when Jeff had closed the lid to the ice machine, just as Todd was about to dump a tub of ice into it. The ice had spilled out all over the floor, and Todd was cleaning and mopping for what felt like a couple of hours. You were never injured like this, Todd. So, what? I'm getting written up again? I've already gone that route a couple more times than I'm supposed to. I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go. Let me go? Like, fire me? You'll be lucky if Jeff doesn't press charges too. I need you to get your stuff, clock out, and go home. The manager returned to the restaurant. Todd turned and watched as the medics closed the doors to the ambulance, and despite himself, he started laughing again and shook his head as he went inside. The ringing started out as part of Todd's dream until it finally woke him up. He looked at his clock. 3:44 a.m. Who the hell is calling this late? Or is it this early? His cell phone was dead, so he searched the cordless landline phone, digging through piles of clothes. He finally found it and hit the button to answer. Yeah? Hello? Who? Shut up and listen. I don't have much time. I know you're gonna think this is a practical joke, but it isn't. You have to do what I say. Don't use the key card. Got that? When the time comes, don't use it! Who is this? Is this Jeff? What? Just don't forget, Todd. You have to... Todd looked at the phone for a moment, too tired to figure it out. He tossed the phone back into the pile of clothes and was fast asleep again as soon as his head hit the pillow. Weeks went by, but Todd still couldn't find a job. His unemployment wasn't enough to pay his bills, and there was nothing in the want ads for him. With all the chain restaurants closing down in Vegas, cooks were a dime a dozen. Then, he saw it. Participants wanted for scientific study. Easy money. No experience necessary. Call now. Huh, I certainly qualify for that job. He tore out the ad and looked for his cell phone. Todd followed the directions to the facility through miles of desert with nothing else in sight. He was in the middle of nowhere and wondered if he'd had enough gas to get back home. He took a number of twists and turns down some old roads and finally saw something ahead. A series of aged brick government buildings and airplane hangars surrounded by electrified chain link fences. On top of that, it was patrolled by heavily armed guards with unmarked black uniforms and very big dogs. The sign out front read, "No unauthorized personnel admitted." He was probably in the wrong place. Todd pulled out to the guardhouse next to the gate and the guard assessed him. Name? Todd Vandergroot. The guard squinted at a list on the computer screen, looked at Todd again, and then back at the screen. You have your ID? Todd rifled through his pockets and found his driver's license. He handed it to the guard and hoped the guy either wouldn't notice or wouldn't care that it was expired. The guard typed in some information and scowled as he handed the ID back. He then taped a temporary permit to the inside corner of Todd's windshield. You're going to follow the yellow line on the driveway to the visitor's parking lot and park in space number 47. Do not deviate from the yellow line or park in any other space than 47. Todd smiled. Or what? I get shot? Something like that. The guard was either completely serious or had the best deadpan delivery he'd ever seen. The gate opened, and without another word, the guard waved him through. Todd swallowed hard before slowly driving forward, carefully following the yellow line. The balding, bespectacled scientist was nice enough, but totally absorbed in his project. Still, Todd was a little nervous. So, is this gonna be some kind of psychological experiment or something? Something like that, the scientist absent-mindedly replied. He was hooking Todd up to some equipment that measured his vital signs on several monitors around the room. They didn't really tell me much at the interview, man. That's because the people who interviewed you don't know much. We just give them a list of questions, and they give us your answers. So, I guess I must have done pretty well. Huh? Todd gave him a lopsided grin. You know, in the interview. The scientist looked at him for a moment. Yeah, you're perfect. The man continued looking at the readings and making notes. A keycard sat on the desk next to some of the scientist's other belongings, and Todd couldn't resist playing a joke on the guy. When the man stood to check some of his equipment, Todd slowly reached over and palmed the plastic card, then slid it into his pocket. This place is pretty cool, man. How come I couldn't find it on Google Maps? Top secret, Todd smiled. Sure, like Area 51 or something, right? The scientist raised an eyebrow and looked at him suspiciously, stopping his work for the first time. How long does this take? 'Cause, I'm supposed to go out with some friends later, and you might want to forget about that. You're going to be here for a while. Something about the way the scientist said a while made him even more nervous. Okay, well, they said no cell phones or anything allowed, so is there a landline I can use to call them, let them know, or... sorry, no one's allowed to call out from here. The scientist went back to work, then suddenly stopped what he was doing. These friends of yours, they're not the type to ask a lot of questions, are they? Huh, my friends? Todd realized what he was saying. Now that you mention it, a couple of them might, do some investigating if anything happened to me, or something. The scientist raised another eyebrow as he stared into Todd's eyes. Wait right here. I'll be right back. He opened the door, then pointed back at Todd. Don't go anywhere. As soon as the scientist was out the door, Todd jumped out of his seat and pulled the wires off of himself. Okay, one step at a time here. Find a phone, call for help, then hide out until the cavalry arrives. He slowly opened the door and looked carefully out into the hallway. There was nobody around, but he still tried to be nonchalant as he walked down the hall in case there were cameras on him. Just as he was almost in the clear, the scientist yelled, Hey! Get back here! Todd took off running and turned the corner, but he realized that if he were on camera, he'd never be able to lose anyone. At the end of the hall, he arrived at the heavy locked door with a red light flashing around and a sign that read, Restricted Area, Level 5 clearance and above only. A guard rounded the corner and tumbled over the scientists. Todd slid the key card through the lock mechanism. 2 more guards appeared and leaped over their fallen comrades. They barreled down the short corridor towards him. I'm going to make it. Maybe not. Hurry up! Open! The door slid open and he made it through, just as it closed on his pursuers. Whew, that was close. Inside the cavernous, restricted warehouse area was mostly dark except for the lights hanging down from the high ceiling, illuminating rows of strange machines and alien-looking technology. What looked like exotic sea creatures and giant insects floated inside huge glass tubes full of some kind of thick liquid. The tubes each had wires and hoses connecting them to various equipment. Holy... As he stood frozen in silence, the guards came in through the door. Todd ran and turned down one of the rows, barely registering the nightmarish creatures contained in the murky liquid of the containers he was passing. The guards were right behind him, and he panicked as he got to the end of the row and hit a wall. Standing next to one of the enormous tubes, Todd grabbed a metal instrument that looked like an alien vacuum cleaner and swung it as hard as he could into the glass container. Strange liquid came rushing out and blocked the guards from reaching him. Further down the row, he saw the scientist's face go pale. The man ran, but tripped and fell to the ground. Todd turned to see what the scientist was running away from. The blood rushed from his face, and his stomach clenched into a ball. Standing next to him was a creature that made the Queen in Aliens look like a children's cartoon, 9 feet tall, slimy, and covered in spikes. It had multiple eyes like a spider, and the fangs of a saber-toothed tiger, jutting forth from a gaping maw surrounded by tentacles. Just as it was about to turn on him, the guards began shooting at it. It went after them instead. Todd took the opportunity to run and tried to help the scientist up on his way down the row. Behind him, he heard the horrifying screams of the guards. He didn't bother to turn to see what was causing the grotesque tearing, cracking, and shredding sounds that followed. The guards' screams stopped. Todd and the scientist ran as wet footsteps increased in speed behind them. They reached the door, the scientist floundering for the key card Todd had taken. Do you still have the key? Todd felt around in his pockets. Where's the damn key card? He must have dropped it somewhere during the chase. Panicked, he shook his head. Then there's only one other option. The man pointed toward the furthest row of machinery, and they ran. The creature's menacing growls continued as they heard its clawed feet slapping the floor ever closer behind them. The last row felt as if it were miles away, as Todd found himself gasping for air. But the adrenaline from being chased by a horrifying monster from another world kept him sprinting faster than he ever had in his life. The men ran past vehicles and ships of varying shapes and sizes, and even with the briefest glance as he rushed by, Todd knew they were not from this planet. They reached what appeared to be a giant potbelly stove, with a window door in it and a small console connected to it by thick wires and cables. Todd thought it looked like a steampunk version of a TARDIS. As the sounds of the alien creature continued to grow nearer, the scientist handed Todd an old flip-style cell phone. Listen carefully. I'm going to send you back in time, but not far. What? To when? I don't have time to make exact calculations. Whenever you end up, just call and warn someone. Anyone. Got it? The creature sped down the road toward them. Get in there! The scientist pushed buttons and turned knobs as Todd opened the door and jumped in. The horrible smell inside the machine was almost unbearable. Through the small window, he saw the alien about to come upon the scientist, and he wondered if the man would be able to finish setting it in time. He heard a locking mechanism activate inside the door. Despite what was coming, he saw the scientist smile in triumph as he hit one last button. In the next second, the creature took the man's head off with one swipe of its claw, like a golf ball leaving the tee. The creature looked Todd in the eye and started toward the machine as it hummed and started to shake. Todd wondered if the door would hold as he backed away from it, then tripped over something. To his shock and horror, he saw his own dead body lying next to him in the early stages of decomposition. What the fuck? The creature pounded on the door. Its many eyes all stared at him in a way that made him feel like dinner as the thing drooled thick saliva all over the window. Todd couldn't decide if he was more scared of the creature or sitting next to his own corpse. His heart pounded so hard he thought it was going to burst from his chest. The door looked as if it was about to give way, when suddenly there was a bright light and the feeling of rocketing down a track on a roller coaster. Todd passed out. He woke up. How long have I been out? He stood, feeling groggy, and looked out the door. There was no sign of the scientist or the alien creature. He tried to open the door, but the handle wouldn't budge. He put all his might behind it, but still, no luck. He was trapped. Staying as far away from his deceased doppelganger as he could, he opened the cell phone and dialed the first number he could think of and waited. Come on, pick up, pick up! He looked at the battery icon and saw it empty and flashing. He heard his own voice answer.
Yeah? Hello? Who?
Shut up and listen. I don't have much time. I know you're gonna think this is a practical joke, but it isn't. You have to do what I say. Don't use the key card. Got that? When the time comes, don't use it.
Who is this? Is this Jeff? What?
Just don't forget, Todd. You have to... The battery died. He threw the phone against the inside of the machine, and it smashed to pieces. Todd stared at the corpse and wondered how long he had before he ran out of air. He tried pulling on the door again, but it was stuck tight. He looked through the small window, desperately searching for any sign of a person outside. He almost had a heart attack as his own face suddenly appeared on the other side of the window. This third Todd started turning the handle on the outside of the door. He pounded on the window and pointed down for first Todd to do the same. Todd got up and they tried turning it together. Finally, it began to move. Once the door was open, third Todd grabbed him. I can't explain everything right now. You'll just have to trust me. I've been doing this for a while, and I think I have it figured out. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone battery. Where's the phone? First, Todd glanced back at the bits of plastic and circuitry on the floor of the time machine. He slowly pointed at it. Damn, why do we always do that? Third Todd paced back and forth. Okay, how about the key card? No, but it has to be in here somewhere. Actually, it won't be, because you haven't lost it yet. But don't worry, I have a few extras. The identical men were discussing how they were going to proceed when they heard a strange humming noise that third Todd recognized as the time machine in action. When fourth Todd appeared, they explained the situation to him. He was confused about one thing though. Hey, how come all of us aren't appearing at the exact same time? First Todd didn't have a clue, but third Todd had it figured out. Every time it happens, events are slightly different. The scientist dude didn't have time to be exact, so the tiniest difference causes us to go back to different points in the past. When the hell did we get so smart? I didn't do it on my own. There were other Todds who have been around even longer trying to figure this whole thing out. The other two Todds answered simultaneously. Were? Third Todd shook his head. You don't want to know. Fourth Todd spoke up. Maybe we do. Third Todd sighed and led his twins down a long row of machinery and artifacts until he got to a giant freezer in the back. He swiped the key card and opened the door. When the frozen vapor cloud dispersed, they could see dozens of dead Todds, some in relatively decent shape, others missing body parts or completely torn to shreds. First Todd was nervous now. Exactly how many times have we tried this kind of thing? I don't know, but it's a lot, and most of us don't make it through. Every time we seem to have it down, something goes wrong. We've tried calling ourselves at various points, stopping ourselves from coming in here in different ways, escaping from this facility, And half the time, it's another one of us who messes everything up. But I think I finally figured out a way that will work. Third Todd shut the door. Here's the plan. First Todd stayed hidden around the corner as the scientists and the guards arrived at the security door where second Todd had just gone through, and the guards finally got the door open. Since he had failed to stop the new him from entering the room, the plan was shot. He'd have to improvise. Just as the guards got the door open and went through, Todd jumped out of hiding and grabbed the scientist by the back of his lab coat. He threw him down and sat on the small man's chest. The scientist's eyes went wide. "What? I thought..." Todd covered his mouth. "Stop talking. If you don't do what I say, you're dead." It seemed like an eternity before the monster was loose and the shots and screaming began. Todd took his hands off the scientist's mouth. "Hear that? I just saved your life. Now follow me." Todd barely had enough time to explain things to the scientists before they got to the time machine. Since the scientist wasn't there to direct the latest Todd to the machine, the creature would be chasing him around elsewhere in the warehouse. "Remember, take your time and make sure you send me back far enough. If this works, none of this will have ever happened." Todd opened the door to the time machine and recoiled as he smelled the rotting corpse. To the scientist's dismay, he pulled the corpse from the chamber and left it sitting right in front of the machine. Todd pointed to his dead clone. "And make sure you set it for the door to unlock, so I'm not trapped in there again." Through the small window, Todd could see his other self being torn limb by limb by the creature at the other end of the warehouse. Would there be enough time for the scientist to get the calculations right this time? The bright light and lurching feeling didn't hit him by surprise this time, but they were just as dramatic, and he still passed out. When Todd awoke, he immediately checked the door and saw that he was able to get out. He checked the guard schedule third Todd had given him and matched it against the time on the retro tech console for the first time machine. Just right. He stood next to the door and waited for the guard to arrive on his routine check. When the guy came through, he didn't even have time to register the presence of another person before Todd knocked him out cold. Todd changed into his uniform, which worked despite being a little too big except for around the waist, where it was really snug. Luckily, these guys even wore shades indoors. Between the uniform and the keycard, getting out wasn't much of a problem. In fact, Todd was practically home free before he ran into his own difficulty during his escape. Another him. Apparently, this Todd had come up with the same idea of stealing a guard's uniform and didn't realize who he was attacking when he leaped from hiding and knocked first Todd to the ground. Fifth Todd lifted his fist and was about to hit him again. "Wait, Todd, it's me!" The newer Todd pulled off the dark glasses and saw his own face. "Jesus, man, what the hell is going on here?" First Todd tried to summarize the whole thing as fast as possible. Fifth Todd agreed to go along with the plan and even provide a diversion inside while First Todd was getting out of the compound. "Just one thing," he said. "What happens to us if your plan works?" First Todd shrugged. "Do know. I guess we all disappear. What do you think? Sounds right to me, I guess." "Depends on what you want to use it for," said the old man behind the counter. "Well, I'm gonna be gluing cloth to plastic." Todd was holding up two different types of super glue. "I'd say they're about the same. Go with the cheaper one." "Sounds good." Todd paid for the glue and left the store giddy with anticipation for his next practical joke. He read the instructions on the package of the super glue on his way down the alley to the parking lot in back and realized someone was blocking his way. "Excuse me." "Look at me," said a familiar voice. Todd almost fell back when he saw himself standing in front of him. "Man, you almost gave me a heart attack." He stood up close to the other Todd and looked his face over. "Dude, that is awesome. Who put you up to this? Is that like professional makeup job or prosthetics or what?" "No, listen to me. Man, there's no way he found someone that looks that much like me. No freaking way. Todd, I am you. I'm from the future." New Todd burst out laughing. Oh, whew, this is freaking great. Is there a camera? Am I being punked or something? He looked around the alley for some sign of recording devices. The lookalike took a hold of him by the front of his shirt. You have to follow my instructions. Don't pull that prank on Jeff. Don't go looking at ads in the newspaper. And most of all, don't go volunteering for any experiments for some extra cash. Todd pulled his twin's hands off his shirt. Yo, look. I don't know who you think you are, but this is getting out of hand. I'm gonna do what I want. And some goon hired by Jeff isn't gonna scare me off, no matter how much you look like me. Angry, new Todd stalked down the alley toward his car. Desperate, first Todd picked up a cement block and lifted it high. New Todd finally realized the gravity of his situation and looked first Todd in the eyes. Wait, you really are me? Something like that. First Todd slammed the block down and broke it over new Todd's head. He fell like a sack of potatoes, and blood streamed from his ears. First Todd checked for a pulse. The other him was dead. First Todd expected to disappear from reality, now that there was no way for this version of himself to exist. He looked at his hands, expecting them to start fading away, but nothing happened. After making sure nobody was around, first Todd put the other Todd's body into a dumpster full of compost. He made sure it was completely covered and wondered what would happen if the body was found. Well, if they identify the body as me, I'll just have to show them that they're wrong. As he was about to walk away, Todd noticed a bag on the ground and picked it up. He pulled out the super glue and looked it over and couldn't help smiling at the practical joke he remembered playing, even though it would never actually happen now. He tossed the glue into the dumpster. He didn't want to be late for work.